The clinking of a wine glass against a plate thundered through the dining hall. Too small a sound for a celebration dinner, yet loud enough to reveal that something was out of place. There were no laughs, no lightness. The air felt suspended, as if every breath was carefully measured. Yvette Prieto's trembling fingers clutched the stem of the glass. The wine swayed, on the verge of spilling, catching the chandelier's light in crimson hues. She wore a deep green dress, elegant, yet that evening it felt more like a disguise than an accessory. Her tearful eyes betrayed an internal battle. Keep up appearances, or let the truth break free. Beside her, Michael Jordan watched in silence. To the world, he had always been the unshakable champion. But at that table, in front of his own family, he breathed heavily and adjusted his cuffs like a man preparing for a game he hadn't trained for. The difference was, this time, the opponent was invisible. At the head of the table, Dolores Jordan sat tall, her eyes scanning every detail, Yvette's trembling, her son's rigidity, the whispered comments from her granddaughters. The matriarch could read silence. And this one was more dangerous than any spoken word. The twins, too young to understand, let out quiet giggles. One of them whispered to her sister, "Why is everyone so serious?" The question sliced through the air like a knife. The room had been set for a celebration. Spotless white linen, subtle floral arrangements, plates arranged like at a royal banquet. But everything clashed with the tension. Even the waiters moved slowly, as if afraid to shatter something fragile. Michael tried to spark a conversation with a close friend, but the words rang hollow. Silence swiftly reclaimed its territory. Dolores adjusted her napkin and spoke, her voice as firm as ever. "What they say out there doesn't matter. What truly lasts is what we hold together in here." Michael looked up. Yvette looked away, biting her lip. The weight in the room grew heavier. Then she gently set her glass down. A simple gesture, yet it made everyone look. Clearing her throat, she finally said, "I need to speak." The twins stopped giggling. Michael stared at her, already sensing the storm. Dolores clasped her fingers and rested her chin on her hands. Yvette's chest rose and fell quickly. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and when she opened them, quiet tears were already streaming down. No one dared to interrupt. The room felt smaller. The sounds of the city faded, leaving only her unsteady breathing. Michael leaned back, fists clenched. It wasn't anger. It was caution. He knew this woman. And he knew that when she chose to speak, nothing would be the same after. Dolores murmured, almost as a prayer, "Daughter, choose your words wisely." Yvette's gaze locked on Michael, as if he were the only person in the world. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, but resolute. "I've been carrying a burden for a long time, and today, I can't hide it anymore." Her words hung like a verdict. Michael didn't blink. Dolores held her breath. The twins shrank back. The dinner, meant to be a symbol of unity, had become a minefield ready to explode. And before any revelation came, everyone understood. That night would never be forgotten. Time seemed delayed. Even the ticking of the wall clock hesitated, as if each second was too heavy to pass. Yvette's words, "I can't hide it anymore," still echoed in the air, louder than any clink of silverware. Michael Jordan leaned forward, elbows anchored on the table. His dark, intense eyes were fixed on his wife, but his face showed no emotion. Not anger, not warmth, just a chilling neutrality, as if he were studying every move before choosing how to feel. Dolores broke the silence. The matriarch adjusted her napkin and spoke, her voice deep but tender. "Yvette, my daughter, you can speak. But remember, this table is not just for meals. It holds memories." Her words sounded both like a blessing and a warning. Whatever was said now would never be forgotten. Yvette took a deep breath, but said nothing. Her eyes bounced between Michael and Dolores before staring into the void. The green dress felt unbearably heavy. Her makeup began to smear with the tears she struggled to hold back. The twins exchanged nervous glances. One asked softly, "Is Mommy mad?" The other only shrugged, not knowing what to say. Then Michael's voice broke the air like thunder. "If you have something to say, say it. But don't turn this into a show." It wasn't just a warning, it was fear. Fear of how her words might echo through friends, employees, and even undercover journalists mingling among the guests, ready to turn a single phrase into headlines. Dolores shot her son a stern look. "Michael, don't silence her. Truth isn't a luxury. It's a necessity." He went quiet, but his clenched jaw revealed the fight within. Yvette slowly lifted her face. Her hands shook over the napkin, but her voice, though trembling, came out clear. "It's not easy to say this in front of everyone, but if I stay silent, I'll lose myself inside this marriage." Dolores closed her eyes, as if praying. Michael rubbed his chin, struggling to stay composed. Yvette went on. She didn't speak of betrayal, but of the invisible prison she lived in. "Out there, everyone sees us as perfect, but no one knows how heavy silence is inside a home." One of the women averted her gaze, uncomfortable. Other guests shifted in their seats, as if witnessing something they had no right to see. Michael leaned in, his voice low and sharp. "You don't have to expose our lives like this." Yvette looked him in the eye, unwavering even as tears flowed. "Yes, I do. Because pretending doesn't protect me. Pretending only kills me inside." Dolores stepped in, calm but relentless. "Sometimes, son, it's not about the image we preserve. It's about the soul we save." The twins, uneasy, called for their mother. "Mom, is everything okay?" Yvette smiled at them, quickly wiping her face. "It is, my love, it is." But no one believed it. The tension thickened. What was once a rehearsal for celebration had become a courtroom drama. The wine remained untouched. The dishes had gone cold, Dolores murmured, almost to herself, but everyone heard. "Love can withstand many things, but fear corrodes even the strongest bonds." Yvette closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, each word cut across the table like a blade. "You think you know our story, but there are things even this whole family doesn't know." Dolores brought a hand to her mouth. Michael looked away, eyes lost in the distance. The twins shrank in their seats, sensing the weight without understanding. The room plunged into absolute silence, and in that moment, everyone knew they were witnessing something irreversible. The crumpled napkin in Yvette's hand exposed her inner turmoil. Her eyes stayed on Michael, searching him for a silent answer. But he was frozen, still as stone. The air felt too thick to breathe. With a breaking voice, she began. "When we got married, I believed nothing could shake the life we'd build. I held on to that certainty like driftwood in a storm. But there were nights when the silence beside me screamed louder than any word. A wave of discomfort swept across the room. Some guests exchanged glances. Others looked down. It felt like watching a private play without having bought a ticket. Dolores leaned in, hands clasped on the table. "Silence speaks, my child, but sometimes it hides more than it reveals." Yvette nodded, tears falling quietly. "I thought it was just insecurity, but the signs kept repeating. Calls in the middle of the night, unexplained trips, evasive glances. I told myself it was just exhaustion, the weight of life, but deep inside, she touched her chest. I knew something was wrong." Michael closed his eyes, took a long breath, and when he spoke, his voice carried the sting of a veiled accusation. "What are you implying, Yvette?" The guests, once frozen, subtly leaned in to hear. She gathered courage. The fear that consumes me is finding out I'm not the only woman in your life. The impact was immediate. The twins widened their eyes, not grasping the meaning but sensing the gravity. Dolores gasped. A murmur rippled through the room. Michael remained silent, fists clenched on the white linen. His stare was sharp enough to cut. Dolores tried to soften the blow. Perhaps it's just insecurity speaking. You both carry the weight of the world. But Yvette shook her head. No, Mom, it's not just insecurity. It's the messages that reach me, the conversations that stop when I walk into a room, the looks from people who swear loyalty but hide secrets. I've spent my life trying to protect this family, but with each passing day, I become more of a prisoner to fear. The room fell into unease. Guests looked away from their cold plates, too stunned to leave, both fascinated and embarrassed. Michael took a deep breath and said, "You know, half the things people say about me are made up. They always have been. You trusted me once. Why doubt me now?" Yvette raised her voice, steady despite the tears. "Because it's not just what they say, Michael. It's what you make me feel. It's the distance. It's you being by my side, but mentally somewhere else." The accusation sliced through the air. Michael closed his eyes, shaking his head. "So this is it? You're airing your insecurity in front of everyone?" Tears rolled down her face, but she didn't retreat. "It's not insecurity. It's pain, and pain can't be hidden behind appearances." Dolores intervened, her voice thick with emotion. "Speak clearly, but don't poison each other with venom." Yvette wiped her face with her napkin, speaking low but sharp. "I don't want war. I just want truth." The phrase echoed like a sentence. The twins shrank back, and one of them looked to her father as if pleading for a response that never came. Michael remained silent, heavy, unable to offer a defense. Yvette took a deep breath. "Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just ghosts. But the fear is real, and it's been destroying what I once believed was unshakable." Dolores muttered, eyes locked on her son. "Silence, sometimes, hurts more than confession." Yvette lowered her head. Her tears dripped onto an already cold plate. The candles flickered. The wine remained untouched, and everyone understood. That night had already cracked beyond repair. Michael dragged his plate a few inches, the metallic scrape louder than it should have been. He breathed deeply, trying to contain the fury swelling inside. A man used to commanding entire arenas now felt cornered in his own home. "That's enough, Yvette," he finally said, his deep voice cutting through the silence. "Do you think it's fair to bring this up in front of my daughters, my mother, our friends? Do you have any idea what tomorrow's headlines will look like?" His tone wasn't just irritation, it was fear. Michael knew that a single twisted phrase could turn decades into ashes under a cruel headline. Yvette, her face streaked with tears, lifted her chin. "I'm no longer afraid of what people say out there. What scares me is what's happening in here. And in here, I've been living in silence." Dolores stepped in again, voice steady despite her age. "Michael, don't attack her. Yelling won't erase pain." He turned to his mother, frustration written all over his face. "Mom, you know how hard I fought to protect this family. I gave my name, my sweat, my whole life exposed. And now I'm treated like a stranger at my own table? It's too much." Dolores met his eyes. "And I know you've given a lot, son, but maybe what she's asking for isn't glory or wealth. Maybe it's just presence." The words struck Michael like an invisible blow. He looked down at his cold plate. At that moment, one of the twins, in painful innocence, asked, "Daddy, is Mommy leaving?" The room froze. Michael softened his gaze for a moment. "No, sweetheart, no one is going anywhere." But the uncertainty in his voice revealed more than he meant to show. Yvette tried to smile at her daughters, wiping her tears. I don't want to leave. I just want to know if the love we have is still real. The phrase landed like a weight on the table. Guests looked away, ashamed to be present. An old friend of Michael's dared to suggest, maybe you two should talk in private. Michael raised his hand, cutting him off. No, it's out now. Let everyone hear. He locked eyes with Yvette. If you have something to accuse me of, say it plainly. Don't insinuate, silence returned. Yvette bit her lip, hesitated. Memories of lonely nights, broken messages, averted gazes. She wanted to scream it all, but still held back. This isn't an accusation, she finally said. It's a plea for truth. I need to believe I'm not living a lie. Michael leaned back, exhausted. His eyes hardened, but glistened with tears. Dolores spoke once more. What destroys a family isn't just mistakes, but the lack of dialogue. You both need to listen to each other. The twins stayed quiet, clinging to one another. The flowers on the table seemed wilted under the weight of the scene. The untouched wine no longer symbolized celebration, but failure. Michael ran a hand over his face, trying to collect himself. You talk about fear, Yvette, but you know what I fear? That the trust we had is now corroded by what people say out there. There have always been rumors. There always will be. Yvette looked up, unwavering. And that's exactly why I need to hear it from you, not from others. I need you to look me in the eyes and tell me if I should still believe. Michael's eyes sparkled for a moment, not from rage, but from restrained emotion. Dolores saw it. She knew her son, could tell when he was opening up and when he was shutting down. Michael, she whispered. Even the strongest need to let their guard down. Before he could respond, Yvette leaned forward, her voice shaky but resolute. I found things I can't ignore anymore. The silence that followed was unbearable. A utensil slipped from someone's hand in the back, the metallic clang echoing like a warning of what was coming. Michael's eyes widened. Dolores frowned. The guests knew they were about to witness a revelation that could change everything. The silence stretched on. Yvette's hands trembled, crushing the napkin as if it were a fragile shield. But her eyes never left Michael's. She looked on the verge of collapse, yet determined not to back down. Sensing the unbearable tension, Dolores spoke with gentle firmness. Daughter, if you're going to say it now. Keeping it in no longer protects, it only poisons. Yvette took a deep breath. Her voice came out low but firm. I found messages. The phrase hit like thunder. Michael shut his eyes, jaw clenched. Guests froze. The entire room became a courtroom. Messages? He repeated, voice deep. From whom? Yvette quickly wiped her tears, but kept her gaze steady. From someone close, someone who should never have crossed the line of trust. Dolores clutched her chest, horrified. The twins exchanged confused glances. Michael leaned forward, trying to maintain control. Are you accusing me of cheating on you? Yvette took a deep breath, hesitated, but answered, I don't fear lies from the world. What terrifies me is betrayal born within the family. A murmur spread across the table. Dolores's heart nearly stopped. What do you mean? Within the family? I saw the conversations, intimate messages, at hours when there should have been nothing but silence. They weren't from fans or strangers. They were from someone who sits at our table. The room plunged into absolute shock. Michael shook his head, incredulous. That's absurd. Yvette didn't back down. No, Michael, I read them myself. For months I tried to convince myself it was all in my head. But when I saw who was on the other end, I couldn't stay silent any longer. Dolores, pale, whispered, Are you telling me that one of us? Yvette lowered her face, as if speaking were impossible. Michael rose slightly, barely containing his fury. Enough with the insinuations. Just say the name. His shout echoed through the hall. Even the waiters flinched. The twins burst into tears, clinging to each other. Yvette closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and her voice came out like a sharp blade. It was with Marcus. The impact was devastating. Dolores let out a moan, covering her face with both hands. Michael stood still, as if struck by an invisible blow. His brother's name hung over the table like a cruel sentence. "That can't be," Dolores murmured. "Marcus wouldn't do that." Yvette lifted her teary but steady gaze. "I didn't want to believe it either, but it was written. Intimate words, hidden plans, secrets that should never have existed." Michael ran his hand over his head, incredulous, eyes burning. "My own brother." The air grew suffocating. Guests sat in silence, unwilling witnesses to the collapse. Dolores, desperate, tried, "There must be a mistake. Maybe someone used his name." "No, Dolores," Yvette interrupted, sobbing. "I read it myself. Every word was a knife." Michael stood abruptly. The chair scraped loudly, the harsh sound slicing through the silence. He took a few steps away, body tense, fists clenched. "My own blood." Dolores could barely rise, crushed by the weight. The twins cried louder. Yvette covered her face, sobbing. "I tried to protect, but I couldn't carry it alone anymore." Michael turned around, eyes filled with tears for the first time in a long time. "Do you understand what you've done, Yvette? You didn't just destroy this marriage. You may have shattered our entire family." His words held no anger, only despair. Dolores, though trembling, raised her voice. "Nothing will stay hidden. If it's true, we'll face it. If it's a lie, we'll prove it. But we won't pretend nothing was said." The dinner had turned into a battlefield. Cold food, wilted flowers, untouched wine. Everything symbolized a broken home. And everyone knew, from that moment on, there was no turning back. The name still echoed like heavy steel. Marcus. The table was frozen in time, and the air felt too thick to breathe. That's when the hall door opened. Marcus appeared, dressed in a dark suit, his face tight. The deadly silence hit him instantly. His eyes scanned every face until they met Michael's, stiff, standing. "What happened here?" he asked, voice calm but cautious. Michael stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You have the nerve to ask?" Marcus frowned, confused. He looked to his mother, but Dolores was pale, hands trembling in her lap. It was Yvette who answered, her voice cracking. I told them what I found out." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, shook his head in disbelief. "So you decided to destroy everything?" Michael exploded, pointing a finger at him. "Just say it! Is it a lie?" Marcus took a deep breath. He looked at the cowering twins, then at his mother, and finally at his brother. "I never had anything with your wife." Yvette stood up, shaking, tears streaming. "I saw the messages, Marcus. Words that left no doubt." He rubbed his face, exasperated. "Messages can be manipulated, Yvette. Our family has always been a target." Michael slammed the table, causing the glasses to rattle. "Don't twist this. I want the truth." Dolores stood, despite her weakness. "That's enough. You're brothers, not enemies." But the fire was already blazing. Marcus looked straight at Michael, voice filled with pain. "Do you really believe I'd be capable of this? Me? The one who stood by you when the world tried to bring you down?" Michael's silence was more brutal than any word. Yvette, still sobbing, insisted. "I didn't make anything up. I read it with my own eyes. Intimate conversations, secrets, promises." The guests, once mere spectators, now sat frozen, like a jury in an unexpected trial. Dolores clutched her chest. "I can't bear to see my sons like this, one against the other." Michael stepped closer to Marcus, nearly face to face. "If I find out it's true, I swear you'll never have a place in this family again." Marcus didn't flinch. "And if it's a lie, if it's all a trap, will you have the courage to look me in the eyes and apologize?" The question fell like a blade. Even Yvette trembled. For the first time, his certainty planted a seed of doubt. Dolores raised her voice, hoarse. The truth must come out, no matter the cost. The twins cried, torn between their parents. Michael tried to console them, but his own fury hardened him. Marcus turned to his mother, pleading, "Mom, look at me! Do you believe I could do this?" Dolores said nothing, and her silence was more painful than any accusation. Michael, overtaken by rage, turned to Yvette. "Show the messages." "Now!" The entire room held its breath. Yvette hesitated, her hand trembling on the napkin. "I didn't bring them." Marcus laughed, sarcastic and bitter. "Of course not, because they don't exist." Yvette suddenly stood, her face burning with tears. "Don't call me a liar. I know what I read." The room caught fire with tension. Friends tried to intervene, but Michael raised his hand, his voice dark. "No one leaves. Not until the truth is out." At that moment, a glass fell to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The sound echoed through the hall like a verdict. Everyone understood. That night would never be forgotten. The room felt petrified. Every breath was audible. Every gaze cut across the table like a blade. Michael remained standing, fists clenched against the polished wood. Yvette, in tears, tried to stay composed. Marcus, motionless, stood firm in his innocence, his last line of defense before collapse. Then, someone unexpected rose. Lorraine, a longtime family friend, always discreet at events, stood up with teary eyes. Her presence, once nearly invisible, suddenly became central. Maybe I should speak," she said, voice trembling. All eyes turned to her. Michael narrowed his eyes in suspicion. Yvette covered her face. Marcus lost some of his color. Lorraine took a deep breath. "I saw them a few weeks ago, in a restaurant, late at night." Marcus wasn't alone. A collective gasp swept the room. Dolores clutched her chest, heart pounding. Michael stepped forward, voice heavy. "With who?" Lorraine hesitated, lowering her gaze. With Yvette, the shock was immediate. Murmurs erupted among the guests. Yvette's eyes widened. "That's a lie!" she screamed, her voice torn with indignation. "I was never alone with Marcus anywhere." Marcus took a step forward, face burning with rage. "Lorraine, how dare you? That's a fabrication." But she stood her ground, trembling. "I wouldn't make it up. I saw you two together, in a way too intimate to be just conversation." Michael staggered, as if struck by another invisible blow. The silence was broken only by the twins' sobs, unable to bear any more. Yvette rushed to her husband, grabbing his arm. "You know me, Michael. You know I would never do this." But he didn't respond. His gaze was distant, as if trying to piece together fragments of a collapsing reality. Marcus turned furiously toward Lorraine. "You've always envied this family, always wanted to interfere. Now you're making up stories just to be the center of attention." "I gain nothing from this," she replied, almost pleading. "I just thought the truth needed to be told." Dolores, in tears, murmured, "Truth or lies. Either way, this home is no longer the same." That's when something unexpected happened. One of the waiters, visibly nervous, discreetly dropped an envelope on the table. He tried to walk away, but Michael's firm hand stopped him. "What is this?" he asked, voice filled with menace. The young man stammered, "It was delivered just now, sir. They said it was for Mrs. Yvette. I didn't know if I should interrupt." Everyone stared at the envelope. Plain white, simple, but as heavy as lead. Yvette hesitated, but Michael took it. "Who brought it?" "I don't know, sir. They just asked me to deliver it." With tense hands, Michael tore the seal. Inside were printed pages, messages. The room fell into absolute silence. He began to read aloud, tension growing with every line. "No one can know. You're the only one who understands me. I can't take hiding my feelings anymore." Dolores let out a sob. Yvette lunged forward, desperate. "Michael, this could be a setup." "Don't believe it." But he continued, his voice heavier with each word. If he finds out, we'll never be able to look anyone in the eye again. But you're worth any risk. The words poisoned the air. All eyes turned to Marcus and Yvette. They both shouted in unison, "This isn't real!" Marcus roared. "I never wrote any of that." Yvette sobbed, collapsing to her knees. The papers fell across the white tablecloth, scattering sentences like scars on pristine fabric. Dolores, in shock, murmured, "Then we're facing a trap. But from whom?" Doubt hovered like toxic smoke. Was it proof of an unthinkable betrayal or a calculated plan to destroy an entire legacy? Dinner was no longer about love or trust. Now, what was at stake was reputation, inheritance, blood. And everyone knew the worst was yet to come. The scattered pages reflected the chandelier's light like sharp blades. Each printed sentence seemed to scream, cutting deeper than any knife. The room remained frozen, but there was no peace, only the restrained breath of a family teetering on the edge. Michael stood, fists clenched on the table. The same hand that had once held trophies now trembled in front of a few lines of text. He had always trusted his instincts, on the court, in business, in life. But now, in front of his mother, his wife, and his brother, instinct failed him. Yvette stayed on her knees, face stained with tears. With every sob, she repeated like a mantra, "I never wrote this. Never." Marcus paced in circles, hands in his hair, eyes blazing. "This is a setup, Michael. Someone's out to destroy you. Destroy us. Open your eyes." Dolores stood with effort, but her voice, though shaky, carried the weight of a verdict. "Enough. I will not allow this house to be torn apart by faceless papers. What kills a family is not the enemy outside. It's the doubt that grows within." Michael turned to her, eyes brimming. "What if it's not doubt, Mother? What if it's the truth? If Yvette? If Marcus?" The words died in his throat. Dolores placed her wrinkled hand firmly on his arm. "Son, you've defeated giants, but now you face the worst enemy of all. Distrust. It corrodes faster than any loss." Yvette lifted her face, desperate. "Michael, look at me. You know my soul. You know I would never do this." He didn't answer. His eyes shifted from his collapsed wife to his brother, who defended himself, as if each glance struck a blow. Marcus stepped forward and raised the pages. Anyone could have faked this. Who's to say it wasn't someone right here? Who's to say it wasn't planted to divide us? A murmur rippled through the guests. Lorraine looked away, uncomfortable. Others shifted in their seats, like uncertain jurors. Dolores rose further, asserting herself with the strength of a matriarch. "Then let's search for the truth where it lives. No more copies. We want the originals. Truth doesn't live on paper. It lives in devices, voices, eyes." Michael slowly nodded, though his expression remained somber. "If this is real, Marcus, you'll never be my brother again." The words hit like a gavel. Marcus staggered for a moment, then answered bitterly, "Look what you've done, Yvette. You poisoned his heart. Now nothing I say will matter." "It wasn't me," she cried through sobs. "I didn't make this up. I'm lost too." The twin girls were crying, clinging to each other, their childish voices echoing innocent sorrow amid the chaos. Michael ran his hands over his face, exhausted. "I need proof. Until then, I trust no one." The phrase was a decree. Guests began rising, embarrassed, but Dolores raised her hand. "No one leaves. Whoever's here will witness this to the end." They called the waiter again. Michael faced him sternly. "Who delivered this?" The boy, trembling, replied, "It was a man. Hat, dark glasses. Didn't give a name. He seemed like he didn't want to be seen." A chill ran through the room. Now there was the shadow of an outsider, manipulating every move. Dolores murmured, her voice cracked. "An external enemy found cracks within. And now we all bleed." Michael collapsed into his chair, crushed by the weight. He ran his fingers over the pages, but no longer read them. He only saw fractures in what was left of the family. If this is fake, I want the name of whoever set us up. And when I find out, there will be no forgiveness. Yvette clutched his hand in desperation, and he didn't pull away. He simply remained torn. Marcus lifted his chin, eyes shining, and declared, "I will prove my innocence, even if I have to tear the whole world apart to do it." In the background, the twins sobbed in their mother's arms. A cruel contrast. Childish innocence against a home torn apart by the poison of doubt. The night wore on. The candles were now stubs of wax, casting trembling shadows on the walls. The cold plates were the corpses of a celebration aborted. The wine remained untouched, reflecting only emptiness. Dinner had become a courtroom, and everyone was bound by the same sentence: uncover who was pulling the invisible strings. Michael, exhausted, scanned the scattered pages like someone searching for flaws in a wall. His face showed a mix of pain and fury. Dolores, steady despite her age, observed every movement, every unsaid word. Marcus, leaning against the wall, looked like a cornered animal, ready to defend his name to the end. Yvette, her head bowed, cried silently, fingers interlaced on her lap. The twins had already been taken away, spared from the storm. It was then that Dolores raised her voice, cutting through the air. If someone from outside brought this envelope, it's not just jealousy or suspicion. It's conspiracy. Michael looked up, still in disbelief. Conspiracy? Against me? Against all of us, she replied, unflinching. This isn't just about your marriage. It's about a family legacy, the name you built, the blood we carry. Her words echoed like an ancestral verdict. Suddenly, Lorraine cleared her throat. Her hands trembled, but her voice emerged. Maybe I know more than I admitted. All eyes turned to her. Michael narrowed his gaze. Marcus crossed his arms, ready to strike. A few weeks ago, I got a call. The voice was distorted, metallic. They said family secrets would be exposed. Messages, documents, even photos. If I didn't cooperate, the mask would fall. I thought it was a prank. Now I know it wasn't. Michael stepped closer, eyes blazing. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was afraid. Lorraine lowered her face. Afraid no one would believe me? Afraid of being used as a scapegoat? Marcus laughed, sarcastic. Convenient. First you accuse, then you come up with mysterious threats. Enough, Dolores interrupted, raising her hand. Let her speak. Lorraine gathered her courage. I wouldn't make up something like this. And I swear I'm not the only one. Silence. It was Yvette who spoke next, weak but clear. I also received anonymous messages. I never said anything because I thought it was just blackmail. But now, I see it's bigger. What did they say? Asked Dolores. If you don't open your eyes, you'll find out too late who's sharing your bed. Yvette took a deep breath. I deleted them, but I remember every word. The room was thick with tension. It wasn't just her word against Marcus's anymore. There was an invisible hand, sowing poison. Michael ran a hand over his head, exasperated. So someone is targeting us deliberately. But who? Who would benefit? Dolores answered firmly. There are always those who profit from a family's downfall. Rivalries, money, envy. Sometimes even someone from within. The silence was cutting. Marcus stepped forward, eyes locked on Lorraine. You could be at the center of this. First accusations, now tales of blackmail. All too convenient. Lorraine met his stare, steady despite the fear. I gain nothing from your downfall. But there are people close who would gain everything. Her gaze shifted, barely, toward the corner of the table. Michael noticed. He followed the look and saw Anthony, his trusted advisor for over a decade, always discreet, always in the background. Anthony, Michael said, voice heavy, why have you stayed silent all this time? The man startled. Because I thought I shouldn't get involved. It's a family matter. But his voice trembled. Sweat glistened on his forehead. Dolores stared him down. Those who stay silent while the house crumbles carry the enemy's burden. Anthony looked away. Michael stepped closer, imposing, "Say it now! Are you involved in this?" The whole room held its breath. For the first time, the shadow wasn't over Yvette or Marcus. It hovered over the man who had always kept too many secrets. Anthony hesitated, and in that instant, everyone knew the web was far more complex than anyone imagined. He stood frozen, hands clasped, sweat dripping from his brow despite the cool air of the hall. The weight of all eyes pressed on him like chains. With each second of silence, suspicion thickened, and the room felt smaller. Michael, standing tall, was more than a sports legend. He was a man betrayed by doubt, a wounded father, a brother on the edge of rupture. "Speak, Anthony, now." His deep voice sliced through the air. Anthony swallowed hard, tried to pull himself together, but his trembling hands betrayed him. "I never wanted it to go this far." Dolores leaned on the table, her voice steady despite her age. "So it was you?" "No, not exactly," he rushed. "I didn't make anything up. I just used what was already there." Yvette stood abruptly, eyes brimming with tears. "What are you saying?" Anthony looked away, unable to face her. "There were conversations, yes, innocent confessions, but I recorded them, edited them, manipulated them, turned confidences into poison." Marcus stepped forward, stunned. "You stole my messages. I had access to the system, to the office accounts. You all let me see everything, and I used it. I wanted to prove that even the Jordans bleed." Yvette clutched her chest as if struck. "You destroyed my life with him." Anthony raised his hands in plea. "I just wanted to step out of the shadows. I was always invisible. I handled contracts, secrets, but was never part of it. You all shined, and I was just the shadow backstage." Michael closed his eyes, a single tear escaping down his cheek. When he spoke, his voice was full of pain. "And to be seen. You chose to sabotage us." "I wanted people to see you weren't perfect." Anthony gasped. "I wanted the world to see the cracks." Dolores, now crying, murmured, "So you traded loyalty for poison." "And poisoned what little trust we had left." Yvette stepped forward, voice trembling but firm. "You made me look guilty before the man I love. You made my daughters doubt me. That's not a plea for recognition. It's cruelty." Marcus, fists clenched, pointed at him. "You turned my name against my brother. That will never be forgiven." The room boiled. Friends whispered. Lorraine paled as she realized she'd also been used. Michael stepped up to Anthony, staring him down like a predator before its prey. "You targeted my mother, my daughters, the woman beside me. That is unforgivable." Anthony dropped to his knees, sobbing. "I just wanted to be seen. I just wanted to exist," Dolores responded, her voice thick but resolute. "Now everyone sees you, but not the way you wanted." The silence that followed was sepulchral. Yvette cried, but her tears held relief. She hadn't been the one to betray. Marcus, still hurt by suspicion, breathed deeply, like a man finally cleared. Michael sank into the chair, face in his hands. "I almost lost her," he murmured. Yvette touched his shoulder, and when he looked up, she smiled through her tears. "Now you know. There's nothing to lose, only to rebuild." Marcus nodded, looking at his brother with bitterness, but also with hope. "I never stopped being your brother. I just needed you to believe." Dolores stood, frail but imposing, like the root of an ancient tree. Tonight showed that fame, money, and glory protect nothing. Only truth keeps a home standing. Anthony was escorted out by security, still begging for forgiveness. But no one answered. His fate was sealed, to live as the man who tried to destroy what was never his. Michael held Yvette's hand on the table. The flowers had wilted. The wine remained untouched. But that gesture, their hands united, was the only proof something was still worth saving. The hall fell into silence, not the silence of doubt, the silence of reconstruction. And that night, which began as a show of perfection, the world witnessed the fall and truth of the Jordan family. No masks, only exposed wounds, and the promise of a new beginning. The next day rose under camera flashes. Helicopters flew over the mansion, reporters swarmed the gates, and cameras captured every shadow behind the drawn curtains. The night, meant to be an intimate celebration, had become a global spectacle. Headlines plastered newsstands and screens. Yvette Prieto's confession exposes cracks in marriage to Michael Jordan. Betrayal, conspiracy, and tears. The dinner that stripped the Jordans bare. From basketball legend to family. Drama. Michael torn between wife and brother. The world devoured every detail as if it were a championship final. But inside the house, another kind of silence reigned, not one of doubt, but of consequences. In the bedroom, Yvette stared into the mirror. Her swollen eyes reflected exhaustion, but also relief. She hadn't lied. She touched her own face, as if trying to find herself again. Michael entered quietly. He held his wedding ring in hand, spinning it between his fingers like someone weighing the value of an entire life. He approached in silence and finally spoke. "You carried a burden alone, a burden that was ours." She turned to him, tears in her eyes. "I just wanted to protect, but fear was devouring me." Michael knelt before her, holding her hands. "I failed to listen. I failed by letting silence replace love. I won't let that happen again." Yvette smiled through her tears. For the first time in weeks, there was room for hope. Downstairs, Dolores walked through the empty hall. The wilted flowers still held the bitter scent of the previous night. She touched the table and murmured, "The truth has always been both our weapon and our wound. It was like this in the beginning, and it will be like this in the end." Marcus entered, visibly shaken. Dolores looked at him with both tenderness and sorrow. "You don't need to prove anything to me anymore. I know who you are. But remember, trust is like crystal. Once cracked, it never returns to what it was." He took a deep breath, his eyes misty. "I don't know if I'll earn my brother's forgiveness." "Forgiveness begins with you," Dolores replied. "Forgive yourself for letting someone else manipulate your heart." Marcus closed his eyes. Memories of childhood with Michael flashed through his mind. Two boys running down the street, laughing, unaware of the weight the future would bring. Outside, journalists spoke in unison. The Jordan family, once a symbol of greatness, now exposed in their deepest vulnerability. A story that transcends sports and reaches millions. Online, theories exploded. Some called Yvette brave, others blamed Marcus, and everyone demanded answers about Anthony, now seen as the mastermind behind the conspiracy. Michael, however, remained publicly silent. He knew that any statement would be interpreted as a verdict. But before his mother, he confessed, "The world thinks it knows me, but no one understands what it's like to carry a name when even inside your own home, love turns into doubt." Dolores held his hand. "You are more than a name. You are a man. And men fail, fall, bleed. But what defines them is how they rise again." The twins ran back into the room, throwing themselves into their parents' arms. They hugged them tightly, their small hands bringing tears to everyone's eyes. Michael lifted his daughters, looking at Yvette. "If we still have a future, it's because of them." She stroked the girl's hair. "Then for them, we rebuild." Outside, cameras only caught the closed curtains. Inside, hands intertwined, fragile yet firm. The confession had exposed wounds, But it had also brought liberation. The family was scarred, forever changed, but it was that very imperfection that made them human. And that morning, even under the ravenous gaze of the world, the Jordans chose to begin again. The days following the dinner were a whirlwind. Helicopters still hovered above the mansion, and reporters clustered at the gates, broadcasting live every shadow that flickered behind the curtains. Headlines echoed on TV screens, radios, and phones. The night the Jordan family crumbled before the world. Conspiracy, tears, and revelations. The truth that nearly destroyed Michael Jordan. But inside the house, the rhythm had already shifted. The external noise contrasted with a dense silence, not one of uncertainty, but of consequence. Michael walked alone through the garden at dawn. The sun gilded the dew-covered leaves, but the shadow on his face revealed his internal battle. For decades, the world had seen him as an untouchable giant. Now, he found himself simply human, vulnerable, marked by pain, but also by the courage to begin anew. From the balcony, Yvette watched him. The wind played with her loose hair, and her eyes held both scars and hope. Her confession had nearly shattered everything, but it also opened a door to something they never had before: truth without masks. Inside the mansion, Dolores flipped through an old photo album. Black and white images captured simpler days. Michael and Marcus playing ball in the yard, family laughter around makeshift tables, a time before fame and fortune. The matriarch caressed one of the photos with trembling fingers and whispered, "Everything can fall apart, but the love we plant is the only thing that endures." On the lower floor, the twins played, their laughter echoing like music against the same walls that had witnessed screams and tears during the night of the scandal. For them, the storm was a distant memory. For the adults, those innocent giggles were a reminder of what was truly worth preserving. Marcus, still shaken, wandered the city alone, avoiding the judgmental stares now following him. He had been cleared by Anthony's confession, but the pain of being pitted against his own brother still burned. Loyalty, he thought, is never quite the same once questioned, but perhaps time could still mend it. Anthony, on the other hand, had become a cursed name. The man who had longed to be seen had finally succeeded, but in the worst way, as a symbol of envy and betrayal. The media reduced him to a shadow, one who tried to topple a family empire and failed. Days later, a private meeting took place. Only 4 people were in the room: Michael, Yvette, Marcus, and Dolores. No cameras, no guests, no witnesses, only the raw truth. Dolores, her voice steady despite her age, was the first to speak. "What happened cannot be erased, but it can be transformed. What you choose now will define our story." Michael looked at Marcus, his voice trembling before it steadied. "I was wrong to doubt you. My anger blinded me. But I want to rebuild. You're still my brother." Marcus took a deep breath, his eyes filled with emotion. "That's all I needed to hear." Yvette took Michael's hand. "I want to rebuild too. Not for appearances, not for the headlines, but for who we are, for what our daughters deserve." Dolores smiled, moved. "Then rebuild, but this time, let it be on truth, not on silence." That night, after the twins had fallen asleep, Michael and Yvette walked together through the moonlit garden. He held her hand tightly, as if vowing never to let go again. "You had the courage to say what I didn't want to hear," he said quietly. "And that saved what we had, even if it almost destroyed us." Yvette smiled through her tears. "Sometimes the truth hurts more than the lie, but it's the only thing that can heal." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying away the weight of the past days. The storm had left scars, but it had also cleared the skies, and under that silent moon, they chose to walk forward together once more. the media would continue to speculate. The scandal would remain a public wound, but for them, in the privacy of their hearts, that night would not be remembered as the fall, but as the moment they chose not to give up. Because even giants fall. But what truly matters is who offers their hand to help them rise.